introduction of this. I might just talk on here and then move back and forth, of course, but I just wanted to, I'm going to come back.
Can everyone hear me okay without the mic? Okay. So, again, my name is Stephanie Russo-Baca. I wear a few different hats, of course. I'm first of all, I'm a mom, right? My son Brock is here. If you saw his face, he was running around yesterday while Martin and I were setting up, and he ran right into one of the pylons. So I did take him to the doctor. He's okay. So, of course, I'm the Water Rights Adjudication Ombudsman for this state. So what that means is, if you have a question about water law, water rights, you can contact me. The Untitled Resources Center is a research and public service project. So what that means is that we're state funded through the New Mexico legislature, and we are here to assist you. The Utton Center is named after Al Utton, a longtime professor of transboundary water resources at the University of New Mexico School of Law. That's where we're housed. So, but we cover the entire state. And so if we need to come to you, that's where we're here today, of course. We're a neutral entity, and so we do work on natural resources, water law, those types of issues. But again, we're a neutral entity, and we're funded through the state. I have pamphlets there with my contact information. You might also recognize me on the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District Board of Directors as well. And we do have a little small farm in Los Chavez, and we raise dairy goats and pasture-raised pigs. So if you ever need pork, we have some. and lots of milk. And dairy goats. I do want to, I will introduce the panel here shortly, but I wanted to recognize a few of our guests as well. I know we have Amy Erickson here from the Reed-Alta Cecilia Rose Factor, from the Rio Grande Agricultural Land Trust. We have our Valencia County Soil and Water Conservation District, the Chair, Teresa Smith-DeCherie. We also have our Socorro County Soil and Water Conservation District. We've got Chris Lopez, who's on the board as well. He's also on the MRGCB Board of Directors. He's a Socorro County member. We have Lila Sturgis with New Mexico Tech here. We also have handouts as well from New Mexico Tech, and of course with the State Engineer's Office. Am I missing anyone else?
Yeah, Gail Armstrong.
Oh, yes.
I'm on the panel.
So she'll be on the panel. And I'll do those quick panel introductions as well here. Okay. And I will do their introductions as they be right before they speak, if that's all right, so we can have a transition. How this works is, and how we've done this in the past, is after each one you can ask the individual presenter a few questions, or if you have something that's not on this panel today, we can also answer that if someone is able. But this is supposed to be a conversation, really. So presentations are short, and then to ask questions. Additionally, I have some little flashcards back there, little postcards. If you don't want to speak up, I teach ag law, so my students usually don't want to talk or raise their hands, but if we have anybody that isn't sure, you have a question that wants to be addressed, you can grab one of those and bring it to me or Cyrese, and we'll have it addressed if you don't want to ask outright. So first I'm going to introduce Ann Markin. Of course, Ann is the Water Operations Division Manager for the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. Ms. Markin works closely on water operations, hydrology, and water delivery in the Middle Rio Grande Valley, and brings valuable on-the-ground insight into current river and irrigation conditions. We're very glad to have her today to speak about the water outlook in the Middle Valley.
Okay, I should have queued up my presentation while you were doing that. I'm sorry, Stephanie.
Oh, I know. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about our shortage.
Did you want to do that first?
I'll do it.
Okay.
Let's get
I will figure this out quickly, I promise.
I may have really convinced Ann to bring this really cool portable touchscreen TV, so that way everybody can see.
Stephanie's persuasive. But it actually was, it's pretty convenient to bring around, but let's see. Hopefully it works from over here. So, thank you for the introduction, Stephanie. I am Markin. I'm the river operations manager at the Conservancy district. Normally I talk about water supply, and this year it's not great, and I'm certain most people are aware of that. And I think Katie, right? Katie is she's gonna touch on that. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit today about the history of water use in the Middle Valley and the formation of the district, and what we're doing now to kind of meet the challenges from water supply.
Do you want me to do it? You can stay there.
Okay, so Middle Rio Grande water history. There's been irrigation since before the 1500s. We all know the Pueblos have been irrigating since time immemorial in the area, and the Spanish came into the Middle Valley in New Mexico in the 1500s and brought their acequia culture with them, and really expanded irrigation throughout the Middle Valley. There was major flooding in the 1920s that really was preventing municipalities from developing, and so there was a big push from those municipalities to seek some sort of flood control. And out of that came MRGC's official plan, and that was approved in 1925. And we were fully operational by 1935. And another important thing that happened in Middle Rio Grande water history was in 1938. The Rio Grande Compact was signed, and we actually just had the, was it the 37th annual or Rio Grande Compact Commission meeting? Yes, or no, 87th, sorry. Yeah. We just had the 87th Rio Grande Compact Commission meeting yesterday, so it's still alive and well, still meeting annually. And then the Flood Control Acts of 1948 and 1950, which resulted in a lot of the flood control reservoirs and also the channelization of the river through the Middle Rio Grande. So when the district was formed, we were given 3 charges, really. The first was river flood control. As I mentioned, the cities were looking to develop, and when the question is not if, but when your city's going to get flooded again, you start to think about what you can do to prevent that from happening. And so the district was formed, and we constructed levees up and down the Middle Valley, and we continue to maintain those to today. The second was drainage. So in the early part of the century, the river channel had it graded, so it was perched up above a lot of the adjacent irrigated floodland or irrigated farmland. And that meant that the groundwater level was very high, and a lot of the lands were inundated with groundwater and couldn't be used to produce agricultural products. So when the district was formed, we built a series of drains that actually lowered the water table and brought a bunch of land that was previously not able to be used for agriculture back into production. And then the third charge was irrigation. So we took 70 different acequia headings that were within the Middle Rio Grande. So there were 70 individual acequias, and each of them had their own diversion off of the Rio Grande prior to the district's formation. And we consolidated that down into originally 6 different diversions, and now we're down to 4 diversions. And this is the extent of the district. We run from Cochiti Dam all the way down to the north boundary of Bosque del Apache. So it's about 150 river miles. You can advance. These are our storage dams and also our diversion dams. So the way the hydrology in the Middle Valley works is in the wintertime, the high mountains get snow, and the snow accumulates up in the mountains. And then in the springtime, as temperatures increase, we see the snow melt off, and flows in the river are elevated from that snow melt. And typically there's more water in the river in the springtime. In a typical year, this year is an exception, but usually in the springtime there's more water in the river than we need to meet the needs of the irrigators. And so we built a lotto dam with that in mind on the Rio Chama. So in the springtime, when there's more water in the river, we can store it up in El Vado. And then in the summertime, the amount of water that's in the river is, unless there's rain inflow, not enough to meet the needs of irrigators. And so we'll release that water that we stored in the springtime to fill that gap between what the farmers need and what's actually naturally occurring in the river. Go back. Sorry, no, it's okay. Maybe I should make my presentation briefer. Is that you sending me a message? Gail?
No, it's like we're done.
And then we have 4 different diversion dams. Cochise Dam is now a U.S. Army Corps of Engineer facility that was built for flood control. But prior to the building of that dam, the MRGCD actually had its own diversion structure there, but it no longer is there. We now receive water into our irrigation facilities for our Cochise division from the outlet works of the Cochise Dam. And that serves the Sandoval County area. It largely serves water to the Pueblo irrigators. There are some non-Pueblo irrigation communities in that area, as Peña Blanca and Sealy, but for the most part, the Cochise division is characterized by Pueblo water use. Our Angostura Diversion Dam, that provides water to our Albuquerque service area, and it's just north of Bernalillo in the Algodones area. And then our Sleta Diversion Dam is our biggest diversion dam. It diverts on both sides of the river, and it serves our Blend division. But because moving water through the Isleta section of the Rio Grande is somewhat inefficient, we actually divert the bulk of the water for our Socorro division up here at the Isleta Diversion Dam. So we're moving water through our Blend division down to Socorro to get it down to our water users there, because if we were to move it through the river, a lot of water would be lost to that, so it's inefficient. And our southernmost diversion dam is our Santa Casia Diversion Dam, which there are a series of locations where water returns from our irrigation network to the river between the Isleta and the Santa Casia Diversion Dam. And so our Santa Casia Diversion Dam pre-diverts it and is an auxiliary water source to that division, in most cases to what's diverted at Isleta. And then on our south boundary is the Bosque del Apache refuge area. No, we didn't ask? So I'm going to lightly touch on the Rio Grande Compact just because it does really impact heavily our water management nowadays. So it was signed in 1938, and it apportions the waters of the Rio Grande amongst Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. And don't read this bullet underneath there. I read it a little bit ago, and it's misleading. So just listen to my words, don't read the bullet. So we have an index gauge that sits up above Cochise Reservoir, and in an average year, New Mexico has to deliver 57% of flows measured at that ODE index gauge down to Elephant Butte. So Elephant Butte is New Mexico's Rio Grande Compact delivery location. And so that's New Mexico's delivery obligation. So in a low flow year, we only have to deliver 57% of that low flow down south. So in some ways, the Rio Grande Compact's pretty elegant because it scales based on the amount of water that is actually coming into the valley. And then there's 2 articles that impact the district's ability to store in a given year. First is Article 6. And Article 6 says that when New Mexico is carrying a Rio Grande Compact debt, before it can store for Middle Valley use, we have to first store the volume of that debt. So right now, New Mexico owes 132,000 acre-feet to the Rio Grande Compact. So before we can store any native Rio Grande water for Middle Valley use, we first have to store that 132,000 acre-feet, and then anything above that could be released and delivered to irrigators in the Middle Valley, which right now we don't even have that much storage space available. So having a sizable debt is really limiting in the district's operations. And the second is Article 7, which means that New Mexico cannot store any native Rio Grande water in its reservoirs upstream of Elephant Butte when Elephant Butte and Caballo have less than 400,000 acre-feet of water stored in them combined. And right now, there's about 250,000 acre-feet, so we're also well below the threshold. So we, right now, for the foreseeable future, will likely not be able to store any native Rio Grande water. And then one more point back is that New Mexico is allowed to carry up to 200,000 acre-feet of Rio Grande Compact debt. So we are carrying New Mexico is carrying 132,000 acre-feet of debt, but it's totally allowable under the compact. We have not violated it. It limits our operations, but we're not gone crosswise with our obligations. So at MRGCE today, so our mission's the same, but we do have an additional mission that isn't statutorily assigned to us. But we do partner with our agencies within our boundaries to work on recreation projects, because we see that there is benefit to the broader community to enjoy the benefits of walking along those acequias and along our ditches. So we do partner with agencies to implement those projects as well. And our operational focus nowadays has moved to first an overhaul of our irrigation and delivery of operations. So what that really means is last year the board approved an enforcement policy, so we can actually identify when people aren't complying with our water distribution policy. And there's now a procedure for addressing those violations. And it's pretty generous. I think we give people the benefit of a doubt, but it still gives us the ability to address when people aren't following our policies. And we're also always expanding water measurement and control. My predecessor, I don't think he came up with it, but I learned it from him. David Gensler used to say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And it's really true. If you don't know how much water you have, how do you know how much water to distribute? So we're constantly expanding our water measurement and control infrastructure so we can better understand what's going on within our system and how we can distribute it. And we're constantly investing in automation, so getting pieces of infrastructure in that can automatically adjust and limit how much we need manpower out, because it's challenging. The ISO job's really challenging. Our ditch riders, they're out there making adjustments in the middle of the night. If we can make their jobs easier, it helps us retain staff as well. And we're always investing in infrastructure that can help us be more resilient to water supply, our current water supply challenges, and also improve our ability to equitably distribute water. And one of those projects that's really relevant to this area is the Feeder 3 pump station. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. We got funding through the Water Trust Board of the state to install a station that allows us to lift water from one of our drainage canals up to some irrigation facilities, where we have some new infrastructure limitations that have created challenges for us to deliver water to certain areas. So we're looking for locations where we can improve how efficiently we're able to equitably distribute water. And that's a big one. I think it's under construction right now, and do you know the timeline for the completion of that? 2 years. It's a really big project. We have to cross we have to bring a pipe underneath railroad and a highway, and the lift is pretty, I don't know how many feet it is, but it's quite a bit of lift. So it's a big project, and we think it's important to be implementing these things to make sure we're addressing infrastructure issues. Go back. Oh, sorry. All right. I'm almost at the end, I promise. So another priority is the reuse of our return flows. Our system was well designed to take advantage of upstream inefficiencies in our irrigation infrastructure. So each division has an interconnectedness, not just to each other, but also to the river channels. So water is diverted and re-diverted at multiple locations throughout our system. And so it's important that we're taking advantage of that. And then also we use our outfalls throughout the Isleta Reach, so we have locations where we can actually poke water out into the river channel here in the Isleta Reach. And we use that when we use those facilities when river flows are quite low and there's limited water that is in the river channel. It's too warm for endangered species to thrive. And we poke out these cooler bits of water that are in our drains to provide what we call thermal refugium to the species. So we're using that infrastructure not to efficiently deliver water to irrigators, but also to benefit the environment. And then Rio Grande compact deliveries are another priority. We're working on a lot of bosque management. The Interstate Stream Commission received $5 million appropriation from the legislature, and that money is being funneled to the district, where we're implementing a lot of bosque management, because we know that a lot of the water that's moved to the Middle Rio Grande is lost to the bosque, and we think that we can start to reduce that loss to invasive species by thoughtful bosque management. So we're really getting our bosque management program off of the ground. Another thing that we've invested in is our SCADA system. That's a supervisory control and data acquisition system. So we have that measurement network that I described earlier, and it's publicly accessible. And this is not something new, it's something that's been around. So if you guys have gone to our website, you could have gone to our gauges and looked at where they were, but it was done in a schematic that, if you weren't familiar with our system, was quite confusing. Has anybody seen the old schematic? Yeah, is it confusing? Yes, okay. So 2 years ago, we implemented a new one, if we could advance the slide. It's called Contrail, and it's got the same data from the same sites, but now it's map-based. So if you go to our website and you see a dot, you can see where it is, and it even ties it to the facilities. So you can see the interconnectedness of our system now with this new website. But the schematic is still available if you guys liked it. Some people looked at it and liked it, it's still there. But this is also an additional resource that we've implemented. And so the other thing that's on our mind is climate change and the future of water in New Mexico. We're in the middle of a mega drought. Some people are calling it acidification, but we do know that our water outlook is not good, right? And we're preparing for that. We know temperatures are going to be higher, and that means more water consumption. And so we think that there'll be large systemic changes. There'll be multi-agency efforts. We'll be working together to improve efficiency of our operations and our infrastructure. There's likely going to be a shift in land use. We're already seeing, particularly in Valencia County, a lot of land move from ag to urban, because it's just it's an urbanizing area. There's a lot going on in Los Lunas. And so we think agriculture will persist, but there will be likely more land urbanized over time. And then those who have the resources will could potentially move from surface flood irrigation and even investing in supplemental wells. So we think that those are the potential future of water in the Middle Rio Grande. And then, as always, we like to encourage people to go to our website. We always have irrigation season outlooks, information about fallowing. We did open up our fallowing program, and I think right now we're enrolling people for the summer. So if you're interested in fallowing, please go to our website. We get project updates. You can pay your water bill online, your water service charge. The gauge data can be accessed there, and we also have mapping and GIS information. So, and always, you're welcome to call our office if you have any questions. We're a friendly group of people. Right, Stephanie? Yeah.
What is fallowing?
Fallowing is, we have a program where we temporarily pay farmers to not irrigate for an irrigation season, and then we take the water that they don't apply to their land, and we use it for, we've done deliveries to the Rio Grande Compact, and we've also used it for the outfalls that I described. That fallowed land, that fallowed water ends up supporting environmental flows out of those.
This year, they didn't have that program?
We didn't have it in the spring because they had to negotiate. So the funding is federal, and it has to change through several agencies' hands to get the agreement in place. So they didn't get the agreement in place to have the fallowing earlier in the spring. But right now, we actually did launch the program for the summer. So if you're interested, please call the district and ask for the fallowing program, and they'll make sure that you get all the information you need.
And can you give us the date for how long we can register for fallowing and the price per acre that's getting paid right now?
Cindy, do you have that information? I should have come prepared with that, but I think it's about a month. I should look it up and give it. I apologize.
It's a very short period.
Yeah, it's a short window.
And it's very much less than it has been in the past.
Right.
We're not going to get water anyway.
175
Yeah.
the rest of the year. 26, 27 season, 550.
That's correct.
Yes, so you can irrigate if there's water available until
26, 27.
June 1st.
Yeah.
But then you can also sign up for next year and this year after June 1st for the total of $5.50 per acre.
So that's for the rest of the season and next season.
Correct.
Is there an irrigation schedule?
For when deliveries are made. Is that the question?
When property owners can actually irrigate?
So that's very dependent on available supply, and because, as I mentioned, we don't have storage water, so it's really uncertain when irrigators will get their next irrigation delivery. So we're in a situation where there's not enough water in the system to meet all irrigators' needs, and so we're on something called rotation, where we're moving blocks of water around the irrigation canals, because it's more efficient to move blocks of water on the irrigation canals. And so the duration between irrigation events gets longer and longer the less supply we have. And so I think moving into the summer, irrigators will likely have to wait extended periods between irrigation deliveries, because we're already seeing inflow into the Middle Valley start to decrease.
And so as people move into these areas, because there's a lot of properties for sale, how does that water get distributed equitably to those farms that may have shared water before and don't share water now? So, for example, I'm like in the middle of property owners where I used to share water with my neighbor. He's since moved out, a new farmer moved in. So how do I know if I get water rights and irrigation rights to my property so I can cultivate my land?
That would be, I can sit down with you and actually look and we can analyze that.
Okay, thank you.
You said under that Article 7, some years permitted us to store water, and some years it didn't, but is that to store irrigation water, or is that to store water for the minnow or for Texas or for other people?
So it's New Mexico can't store any water, and it's post-1929 reservoirs, and so all the reservoirs that are applied to us are post-1929. So even like the city of Santa Fe can store water for municipal use, and they also can't store in one of their reservoirs because so it's any storage, but from our perspective, storage means for irrigation use. So this year we're well below that 400,000 acre foot threshold, and I think we have been in Article 7 restrictions since the beginning of 2024. So it's been many years since there's been enough water down in Elephant Butte to lift that restriction.
And does Article 7 say we have to store at El Vado, or does it say we can store anywhere that will let us store?
So Article 7 doesn't weigh in on that, but our permit was originally tied to El Vado, and a lot of the other reservoirs up north weren't permitted to store native Rio Grande water. But last year we did finish an agreement with the Water Utility Authority to be able to store native Rio Grande water in Abiquiu Reservoir, and the Corps updated their water control manual that now legally allows us to do it as well. And so the district has about 100,000 acre feet of space in Abiquiu that we could store water in, but we can't because of the compact. So El Vado is not available to us. It can only store 25,000 acre feet right now, which is a very small amount of water. But we have space in Abiquiu, but we can't store water there because of the compact.
Even though El Vado is not available, we still have other spaces that we could store.
Yes. After the Bureau of Reclamation realized that the project was going to take longer at El Vado than anticipated, we immediately started working on getting an agreement and finding space. So they've been very helpful in helping us find alternative locations. And things very much aligned because it was worded 2020, right?
Yes.
So that's a federal law that updated Abiquiu to allow for that native Rio Grande storage, because prior to that, it was not authorized to store native Rio Grande water. So things kind of lined up well for us to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am?
So I have a question about El Vado related to what you were just talking about. What is the status and expectation? And then I have one other question after that.
So they're going through a new alternatives analysis right now, so they're looking at some of the alternatives. We expect, at least a decade. It's going to be a very long time.
That was from the report from the Compact Commission.
Oh my gosh, that really hurts us. So a term that I've heard, I'm an editor from Socorro County, a term that I've heard more often now being used instead of climate change are climate extremes. And I'm just curious, because I live where I live and have been involved in farming since 1972 as a kid and then as an adult in the same area, about 8 miles south of Socorro. And the flooding has increased a lot in the fields that are kind of on the west side of the district area in the valley. Is that being addressed? It wasn't on your list of important things. You talked mostly about drought, but I'm just curious what you were thinking with the climate extremes in relation to the increased flooding.
Yeah, a lot of the forecasts show that we, this part of in New Mexico, will likely not see a reduction in precipitation as we see the climate change, but we'll see it, the form that it comes in change, right? And we are seeing it because we're getting a lot of our precipitation in these extreme weather events. And it's important to note that the district's water or flood control authority is very specific to river channel flooding, so we don't do the upland, from flooding from arroyos and runoff. But there has been the development of a flood control authority. They're working on that right now in Valencia County. I don't know if there's work on it in the Socorro County, if you have any information about that. But I do think long-term, if we start to see us move from a snowmelt-driven system into maybe a more monsoon-driven water supply, I think we are going to have to rethink how our infrastructure is designed to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it's a really important conversation. There's a lot of farmland that's being retired because of water rights sell-off and so forth. And it seems to me like that some of that could be used to take the pressure off the ditches when it floods and just open the turnouts to those fields that are not being farmed and let some flood water go into those fields. So.
Well, sometimes those flooding events are so intense that we can't, even opening up turnouts wouldn't address like the amount of water that's coming into the system. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Did you have something to add to that?
I think with the new Valencia County Arroyo flood control authority, we are looking at, MRGCD is looking at options to how to catch that, to do exactly what you're saying, so that it doesn't get just lost essentially. So how can you capture that and even make compact compliance? Because there's like a 96-hour rule for flood water where you can capture it, but you have to then release it after. So
Yeah, and the Bernalillo County has a MAPCA in Albuquerque that captures flood water, and those systems do interact with our irrigation network, so they can stop those really high-intensity flooding events and then just slowly dribble them out into our system, and it turns into irrigation supply. So I do think that those are the things they're talking about in Valencia County as well.
I got a question about your new pumping system. I think it's this one that's going across the High Line.
Yeah.
Right, I've seen all the pipes going in.
Right.
What's going to become of that excess water that you pull from the low-lying areas? What's the plan for that?
So I don't think that it's going to create excess water. We can't move as much water through the High Line as we used to be able to because of some of those high-intensity events that have caused the canals to breach. And so we're limited in how much water we can move through there. And so instead of creating excess water, what it's going to do, it's going to allow us to convey water to the area in a different way and lift it up. So there won't be excess water. It's just allowing us to access water that we otherwise wouldn't be able to.
So it's lifting it to the top of the High Line and then releasing it back down?
Right, and it'll make it available to those several irrigation canals that receive water off of Feeder 3.
Okay.
And then there's a connection between Feeder 3 and the drain that ultimately goes down to Socorro. So any water lifted and unused goes back into the drain and down to Socorro.
Okay, so this is kind of like recycling the water?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Yes, sir?
This is kind of a double question. How many irrigated acres are there in the Conservancy? And then the second part of that is how many pre-1907 rights have been transferred to development type stuff, or cities used to see stuff from this area going to Santa Fe, for example. Well, that doesn't do us any good at all here. Santa Fe is great, but I think you can crash a Conservancy district. And I believe they've done it in Colorado. I'm not entirely sure, but we used to go to auctions there. And one of the things at the farm sales, they were selling the water rights for that farm. And more than once, the urban areas around there had buyers. They bought the farm stuff. So like they dry out the farm.
Right. So we have about 55,000 acres within the entire Conservancy district. And I don't know exactly how much water we've actually transferred over time. Stephanie might have a better sense of that. But the district does protest any water transfers outside of the district, even if they're small. I think we protested a transfer of like 25 CFS to the city of Santa Fe. And so we are actively, challenging water being transferred out of the district.
And to kind of answer your question about the pre-1907 water rights, we're unadjudicated here in the Middle Valley. So we've heard of like the Little Rio Grande being adjudicated, Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. You've heard that lawsuit. During that suit, that the adjudication was stayed or it was paused, right? While it was going, it was always going, right? And so what it means is we don't actually, the Office of the State Engineer has not done a formal legal process of adjudicating or determining what water rights are here in the Middle Valley. What I like to call like mini adjudication. So if somebody declares a water right and then tries to transfer it, the state engineer has to do an evaluation of that water right and then can make a determination if there's a pre-1907 water right without an adjudication, full-blown adjudication. Yeah. So we don't necessarily, know how many pre-1907 water rights are in the Middle Valley until that adjudication is finalized. And again, so anybody can declare a water right. And I love to say this, but like I could declare I'm a unicorn. That does not make it true. It is not until it is permitted by the state engineer do we know if it's a pre-1907 water right. And so, again, the only time that happens is when it's transferred. Now, a water right could be transferred within the district, say a farmer to farmer, as long as it's in the benefited area of the district, and MRGCD doesn't protest it then. It's only if it goes, MRGCD will only protest it if it's in the benefited area, outside, even if it's a foot outside of it. And so, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it always seems like with the law, if you've got money, you might be able to get justice, and otherwise, perhaps not. So if they're transferring water to Las Lunas, I believe most of their wells are up on the hill. That's outside the benefited area. Do you protest it?
Yes. Now, the only thing that I want to clarify is surface diversions, not necessarily groundwater. And that would have to be a board policy change of protesting groundwater, because you can transfer a surface water into groundwater into surface water. And so if what you're alluding to, say, for example, is like the Niagara bottling in Los Lunas, if somebody were to transfer groundwater within the benefited area to, say, the wells in Los Lunas, which are outside of the benefited area, MRGCD only protests surface diversions so far. I mean, unless it would have a huge effect. I don't know,
Has that always been the policy of protesting surface water outside of your district, or is that a new change? Is that a new change?
No, but this is something that the board is solidifying. We talked about this at the last meeting of making it a more clear policy.
Can I just add on to that? Valencia Soil and Water Conservation District is kind of a misnomer because we actually serve all of Valencia County, Pueblo Espleta, Pueblo Laguna, and northern Socorro County. We actually do protest these kinds of water right transfers. We are one of 3 parties that are protesting with the Office of the State Engineer the attempt by the village of Los Lunas and Niagara bottling water to transfer these water rights for the purpose of bottling them in plastic bottles to be sent outside of the state of New Mexico when we are in a water crisis. So that case is moving forward. We were asked to join by the Pueblo Espleta. Our board took that decision, and we have the statutory authority to try to protect these natural resources. We don't have tons of money to do every case, but this was a case that was very essential. And I'm happy to stand for any questions after the meeting on a sidebar, but we're here to serve.
If no further questions for Ann, we'll continue the conversation and what's our next speaker? Does that sound? Okay.
You're up.
Okay. It's my pleasure to welcome Representative Gail Armstrong, who serves House District 49 in the New Mexico Legislature. She represents parts of Catherine, Sierra, for Socorro, and Valencia counties. She has served since 2017 and currently serves as House Minority Floor Leader, so we have some big guns in the House today. We are, of course, very grateful to have her today and to share her perspective on the 2026 legislative session.
Thank you, Stephanie. So, thank you guys for coming out today. I live on a ranch west of Magdalena. My district goes from Mountain Air to Arizona, from the edge of Los Lunas to Hatch. So I do have the largest House district in the state and 13th in the nation. And so it's a really large, very rural New Mexico district. I was raised in Catherine County and Socorro County. And my husband and I have been married for 42 years. We have 4 children and 16 grandchildren, from 17 to 1. So and that's why I do this job, is for the children of New Mexico and making sure that we have a great New Mexico for everyone to thrive. There's a couple of things that I just want to hit on in the legislative session. So when I first came in, the budget was $6 billion in 2017. Now it's over $11 billion. We've had a plethora of money the last 8 years, about $3 billion in excess money every year. And most of that is from the oil and gas industry, where that money's coming from. When gas prices are high in New Mexico, that means the state budget has a lot of money to fund things in New Mexico. It's really hard on us, but it does mean that the budget for New Mexico will be high. So I look at the gas prices and I'm like, oh, Eve, well, we can fund all these things that we want to fund. One of the things I want to bring up is healthcare. We introduced 12 different compacts in the healthcare industry. I carried 2 of those. I've carried several over the years. The only one that passed was the Physicians Health Compact, and the Health Compact is entering a compact with neighboring states to make it easier to do business if you change from state to state. So it's actually a good thing, in my opinion. But it's unfortunate that most of them didn't pass. I think, some people think there's something funky about them. I've had them for years, and I really think they're good. I think New Mexico is really pushing the health compacts to make it easier, especially in a crisis in New Mexico with the loss of doctors in our state and healthcare providers in general. I was the sponsor of the Medical Malpractice Reform Act. It's something that got broken in the legislature. I voted against the breaking of it. For the last 5 years, we removed the cap for filing medical malpractice. Some of the payouts were 110 million, 60 million. So doctors were leaving. And I personally believe in holding people accountable, but doctors are humans and they will make mistakes, but as long as they're accountable for what they did, I think that's, there's a happy medium. So it took us a long time. Representative Christine Chandler and I carried that bill in meetings with the governor and all the hospital association and GAMA, which is the Greater Albuquerque Medical Association, tons of people. It took us, if I was a betting woman, which I am, I would have bet that the medical malpractice fix would not have passed this session. But the governor sent a loud and clear message that she would hold another special session if it didn't pass. A lot of talks, a lot of shuffling, a lot of I was very nervous the first time my very first kiss. I was very nervous. Every committee that the medical malpractice bill went in, I was nervous, just like my first kiss. I thought this is either gonna fail, or they're gonna amend it so badly that it's gonna undo what we're trying to do. And anyway, ended up, it passed, the governor signed it. Not everyone was 100% happy, but overall, we got it passed, and the doctors and healthcare providers in general are very, very happy that this passed. It was a very heavy lift, though. We passed House Bill 80, which was the Oil and Gas Reclamation Fund. Back in about probably 2014-ish or so, when we didn't have a lot of money for the legislature, for the state of New Mexico to do things, we were sweeping. And so the Oil and Gas Reclamation Fund, we started taking money out of that fund. Certain percentage in the oil and gas industry, they have to pay it like a tax or a fee, and it creates this fund. We started taking money out of that because we didn't have money to fund things that we needed to fund that were necessary. Not that that wasn't, but other issues, like schools. And so this last year we fixed that, where they can't take the money out of there anymore to go into the general fund. It goes all into the Oil and Gas Reclamation Fund, which is good for New Mexico. We do need to reclaim the oil and gas wells that are abandoned or that just leave. There were over 30 bills introduced on the crime crisis here in the state of New Mexico. Unfortunately, only one of them passed. And so there's a lot of different ideas on how to navigate through that, but one did pass and get signed by the governor. We did raise the penalties for water theft and fines. I think you guys are probably well aware of that. And so because water is a precious resource here in the state of New Mexico, myself and Melanie Stansberry passed the Water Data Act. Gosh, I don't know how long ago it was, but we passed the Water Data Act, but it was never funded. They would never give anybody the money to actually find out exactly what you say. If it's not measurable, how can we manage it? And so hopefully that's helping with New Mexico Tech is well involved in that, so we're excited about that. $4 million in the drinking water needs statewide for New Mexico was put in. Money was put in for soil and water conservation districts so that they can help them manage different things, hire people, and help them to get that money out the door in the districts. House Bill 109, the Water Project Fund changes that requires the Water Trust Board to put things in order and to prioritize how they're going to allocate that money out. Overall, the state of New Mexico is in really good shape. We have a huge reserve right now, and it is thanks to smart thinking out of years and years ago. We're doing fine. The problems that we're having right now, I know, are the water issues across the state of New Mexico, and economic development, trying to figure out where that's going to be, how that's going to be. Housing for New Mexicans, we did pass a lot of legislation for housing, mainly in very urban areas, trying to help, help the unhoused find housing in some way, shape, or form, and also behavioral health. I think that a lot of things stem from behavioral health, and we really need, I think passing one of the compacts that we did will help bring more behavioral health physicians and in that entity, in that area, to help New Mexicans. I think since COVID, our mental health has really been touched, and unfortunately, we see that a lot, and we really, in my opinion, we just need to help people that need that. And if they reach out, we need to have a way to give them the information they need. That's about, there was a lot that went on, but that's the highlights. And if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer. Yes?
So regarding the, you brought up oil and gas, it's our bread and butter in this state.
Yes, ma'am.
And as we are moving more and more to renewable, we see solar fields coming in, and I was just in Santa Fe, Santa Fe County Commissioners just approved the biggest solar field in the state. And one of the questions that's come up in my work and with the wind farms and all of that, what are these renewable energy companies bringing to the table when we move from oil and gas to renewables? And because we do in this state depend on that oil and gas revenue.
Well, you can take it as good news or bad news, but there's studies been done that renewable energies will never replace what oil and gas bring to the state of New Mexico financially. There's nothing that can replace them. They fund over half of our budget in the state of New Mexico. So ultimately, a lot of the renewables are not, New Mexico's really not benefiting from the wind farms particularly. All that energy is being sold out of state. I got really, hit pretty hard because I voted against taking the land out of the property taxes for where those wind turbines are. I voted against that because the counties, that's how they get their money. And so of course, I don't receive any money from the wind turbine companies because I voted against that. And so it passed. But they really are not bringing, we have a lot of subsidies in the state of New Mexico. We subsidize for the wind and solar, but we don't subsidize any for oil and gas. We hit them with fines and fees and a lot, so they pay a lot. I say let's do it all and let's do it respectfully. But some people see that different.
Right.
They have different opinions on what that is.
So, and I have a second question, it's kind of related to that, because there's been a lot of incentives for, in the governor's budget to bring renewables in, and also a lot of incentives for quantum corporations, data centers. I mean, she wanted she wanted a quantum corporation tax credit, right? That didn't pass, is that correct?
I don't know if I think it did pass.
I think it was passed, but it certainly got woven into the budget, right?
Yes, I believe it was put in the budget, so there was no bill. That happens a lot. So it's in House Bill 2 is the budget.
Right.
And people put things in there all the time with all kinds of language and money. And unfortunately, if you're not on the finance committee, you get a book about this thick on your desk and you're gonna vote.
Right.
So we're all going through it, as fast as we can, and of course we have people that look at it for us ahead of time and they tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I believe that was, I know for a fact the quantum stuff was in.
That's right,
in there.
it's definitely woven in.
Yes.
And that's attracting this sort of gold rush of data centers coming in. And then that relates to the water, because they need the water. Right now, we actually have somebody on our team, a board member, who told me he was spending the weekend reviewing 23 data centers that are proposed here for New Mexico. And the impact, when we were talking about we don't have water, it just, I know there's people who feel like the governor put the state up for sale. And how can we address that as a community, because we're dealing with this right now in Socorro?
Well, one of the things that I tell people, they always ask, how can I get involved? What can I do? How can I get involved? You guys, we make a lot of mistakes in the legislature. Don't wait until it's something that affects you to get involved. You should get involved now, because say the quantum or the data centers, yes, that's going to affect our water here in the state of New Mexico, but there's a lot of other bad things that are going to affect the state of New Mexico. We're really anti-business in the state of New Mexico. We're heavily regulated, which is, we need accountability. But I've been fighting really hard in the regulations to have almost a concierge service, someone that walks you through the process. This is the paperwork you need to fill out. These are the rules you need to follow. And you know it, instead of making a mistake and getting a fine. I do believe that we all know in this room that water I mean, I have the St. Augustine's. Before I was a state representative, we were fighting that. We're still fighting that. The data center that's being proposed in Socorro. Here we have Facebook and Amazon and the water bottling. So where's the happy medium of growing New Mexico and getting jobs without tons of subsidies, because subsidies are taxpayer money. The state does not make money, we take money from the taxpayers. That's how we fund it. So where is the happy medium of creating jobs and economic development in the state of New Mexico, building housing, universal child care, free college education? Where is the happy medium of making sure we can do those things but not mess up rural New Mexico, are the ones who are getting hit the hardest, the farmers, the wildlife in the streams. That's where it starts, the wildlife, then the farmers. And so I just don't know how we do it. But I would suggest that you get involved long before things happen. So in the interim, we have interim committees, and the cake gets baked in those interim committees, you guys. And you can find a list of when they're going to meet on the nmlegis.gov website. You'll see it. And we meet all across the state. But there's a water committee meeting. There's water meetings, and I think you're in almost every one of them.
Right, and so the Water and Natural Resource Committee, we're working with the folks to bring it to Socorro, and we're trying to plan it for spring, which is almost over, for fall. So just to keep people apprised, but going to those is an opportunity for the public to comment and to find out what's happening on those issues.
And the agendas are posted online, usually ahead of time, so you'll know what
And
they're
you
going to
can
talk about.
attend virtually.
Yes, exponential.
Do you know what the financing sources are for the one in Socorro County, the data center that's being proposed? Is state money going to support that?
There may be tax incentives that they can apply for, but there's no state money that's going to support that. But there could be tax incentives.
One of the things I'm really worried about with that data center is it's going to grease the skids to open up the San Augustine Plain issue again.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's happening with that data center, it's really unfortunate. I met with them as soon as I found out about it, and I found out about it on Facebook, which is really unfortunate. I am the state representative that represents that area where it's going, and so I called the lobbyist. I said, I need a meeting. I had a meeting this week. It was sketchy at best. Was a guy from Canada. I can't recall his name right now.
Jason Bach.
Yeah, that was it.
Flew in on his Learjet to meet with you, huh?
Yeah. No, I think they were here for the meeting that happened on Friday. But I said, I need to know this. But I asked for a map. I asked for more details. I haven't received that yet because I really want to know where it's going, what's happening. I do want people to remember that private property rights, it's really difficult. It's really difficult because you have private property rights. You don't want people taking off of your property that you own, that you've paid taxes on, that you bought and paid for, or are paying for. So it's really hard if these ranches or any other entity sell to things like that, just like the wind turbines, different things. It is a private property right. But I also know when it starts affecting all of us, then that should be brought to the attention. It should have been more laid out in the beginning. I found out they've known about this for 1.5 years. So that's a problem.
The new president of Tech, as of yesterday, do you have a proposal? There's no proposal.
Right. It's in its infancy stages is what they're saying. And so, but I've asked for more detail, and I will share that as soon as I get it. And I told them that I would, and I told them they've already screwed up because people are upset about it because of the way they found out. If they would have been more upfront on the front side, maybe something would have come that was not so divisive.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm technically not from the district. I came from Socorro, exactly because of the data center. So I think in this case, it's potentially a good alliance between rural people and everyone in Socorro and Tech actually accept the regions, oppose it. And I'm sorry I was late. Do people know about a petition against the data center?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Oh, what if you were in Socorro County and you have not
Yes.
signed this petition, please?
Yeah, started by New Mexico Tech. So yeah, and tech scientists debunk those claims that they can extract enough water from the atmosphere. So yeah, let's fight together.
Yeah. When they told me that they were extracting from the atmosphere too. And I just said, we live in the desert, right? So, anyway, yes ma'am.
I just wanted to add that I want to thank the legislature again. You mentioned the money to support New Mexico water data, which is making all of our data more available, but you didn't mention how strongly we're supporting mapping our aquifers and understanding our hydrology. And so this money right now is, we have unprecedented support from the state to map our aquifers and understand our hydrology so that we know what we have and we can't just be robbed by, if you don't have the data, like we keep saying, we can't manage it if we don't know. And so I really want to thank the legislature again for making that happen, and I think it's so important for all of New Mexico. So that's what I do, the Aquifer Mapping Program Manager at the Bureau of Geology in Socorro. You're the ones that have been flying helicopters around lately. It's not for the data centers. This was in the works long before that. But we've mapped 14% of the state over the last few months, being able to fly helicopters and take data at a much higher rate and speed than we've ever been able to do before. So we have a lot more knowledge, and we're doing just groundbreaking work for the state, and it's because of the support from our legislator that we can do that.
Thank you for mentioning that.
How long will it take for them to finish getting the data and start implementing the program?
So we did fly Socorro, like I mentioned, so the helicopters were here. That data is just now coming to us because we just flew. It takes a while to take that kind of complex geology. It's like flying a metal detector over the ground.
How long is a while? 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? What are we
So
talking
we
about?
are making 3D models of everything that we have. I would say probably a year from now we might have some models.
And then you can start implementing some kind of program.
So we don't do any programs. We're just here to be like, here's the facts. So we have the science. We don't make decisions. We're just here to provide the ground truth of what's
And
happening.
where does it go after you get the data?
It's for anybody to use.
I think what will happen after that's all done, then we'll work with the state engineer's office and the legislature together will form some kind of a decision.
So the state engineer uses a lot of water decision support models so that when you do a transfer, they can understand the impact. And so better data helps everyone improve the models that are even already there.
Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for coming. I don't understand the subsidies for renewable projects. Can you explain?
A lot of the subsidies it's usually tax credits. That's the normal way to do it, unless they have come in through the LEDA program, which is a program at the state level to incentivize business, to bring larger businesses to the state of New Mexico. One of them that was incentivized, I believe, is the one right outside of Los Lunas on the, what's it called? That bought the big giant building. No, not Walmart. It used to be the cabinet making shop. Pacific Fusion.
Yeah.
They probably capitalized on some LEDA money and some tax incentives. And so the problem with the state of New Mexico is we have a lot of tax incentives, and so that cuts down our tax base to be able to, fund things that we want to. So anytime we introduce a piece of legislation that actually takes money, this is a for instance. Several years ago, a constituent came to me. It was actually Marty Greenwood from San Antonio. He said, "Did you know that New Mexico taxes our Social Security?" I said, "No, I'm not on Social Security. I didn't know that." So we were one of 13 states that taxed Social Security income. And so I ran a bill for several years, could never get it over the finish line. Finally, about 2 years ago, Senator Padilla hopped on and we got it over the finish line. And I believe the federal administration now said no more, but in the state of New Mexico. But it was taking money out of the tax base. And so people were upset that, oh, you're taking money away from schools. And I'm like, well, we're letting people that have earned that Social Security keep that money. They've already paid taxes on it. So that's the kind of thing that happens at the legislature level where we have to balance that. But there are a lot of tax incentives for renewables, and it's mostly tax. And I don't know what they are right off the bat, but I could find that out. I could call the tax secretary, Stephanie Shorty-Clark. Yes, ma'am.
And I believe you mentioned to you earlier about everyone's finding the transmission lines, private lines, that we found out like this, that another transmission line is going to be going through there called Rio Solar. And of course, no one's really reached out to anyone, but that's another renewable energy that we don't need coming to destroy our lands. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with that, and there's a few here there are.
Yes, thank you for that. Your brother brought that to my attention, and he gave me the gentleman's name. So we'll find out more information about that. But sometimes when there's an easement, if there's an existing easement for a power line, another power line can use that easement. So
just that one easement, right?
Just the one easement. I mean, unless they're buying property, but I think it would be in the same easement. But that does, when there is an easement, it opens it up for other people to be able to use it for the same type of work. Yes, ma'am. Did you need?
I was just going to mention that I think that Rio Solar is Sancia.
Yeah.
And when they got that approval, it was for 2 lines, and one would go up, and the second one would go up.
But this is the third one.
But Pattern Energy
Yes,
was
Pattern and then Sunzia.
and they're all tied together. But that Rio Solar and the Sancia line were approved at the same time.
Within the same easement.
Within the same easement.
Yes.
And then Pattern tucked in there somewhere, sometimes.
This wasn't Spirit, was it on its own?
Right.
That was the first one.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I was
going to ask you, since they have an easement already set up, can they increase the size of that easement, or is it just specific to that easement?
Once there's an easement, it's specific to that easement. Now, if they approach the people that own the property, they could expand, but they can't do that without buying more property. It has to stay within that easement.
How long or whatever is the easement?
I don't know the width. I really don't know that offhand. I have no idea what the easement is. But if you drive by there, you'll probably see a fence line on each side.
150 yards.
150 yards?
Yes, that's what I heard.
Because they're thinking of putting a power line right in front of my house.
A different one?
A different one. In between my house and my daughter's house. I'm gonna be maybe 50, 100 feet away from it. I passed through this one that they putting out. It buzzes real loud. It's terrible. And radiation and all that stuff. And I'm supposed to be with Leon Porter Wednesday, but
okay, so that's the same, we're talking about the same one. I have Leon Porter's phone number.
yeah.
I know Leon. I'll call him and see what's going on, and they're gonna let me know what's happening in that area. But yeah, we'll find out for sure. So my contact information, my cell phone is actually listed online under nmlegis.gov. Feel free to call me with anything, anytime, any place, anywhere. I'll do my best to get an answer, help you, whatever it is. We're in the middle of election season right now, so we're busy, but I'm in the area a lot. If anybody needs something, I'm happy to stop by anytime, or a phone visit, whatever it is. So, and I am born and raised in New Mexico, and I'm never leaving. So, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Stephanie, for setting this up. I do need to run. I have another engagement with my family. So thank you again. I appreciate you all.
And the food was great.
I do want to highlight that Representative Armstrong, she's being modest, but helped fund this building, so I think it's really a full circle that. Okay. So we have this one, I know there was like, we had posted 2 presenters, but at the last minute, we got the state engineer's office to come and present. So I'm going to introduce Katie Zemlick. She's the Technical Services Program Director at the New Mexico Office of the State Engineer. She's the former Hydrology Bureau's chief. She has a Ph.D. in Civil and Environmental Engineering from UNM and is trained as a hydrological modeler specializing in groundwater modeling. That is much more sophisticated than I as a lowly attorney. So, but I really appreciate her having this presentation ready to go. And again, we'll stand for questions after. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me. A lot of the things I plan to talk about today have already been discussed, but I'm going to focus a little bit on legislative updates pertaining to the enforcement bill that Representative Armstrong mentioned, as well as some priorities of the Office of the State Engineer. This is so fancy. Drought conditions persist. Everybody is aware of this. We're now parts of our state are really in extreme drought, mostly due to a really abysmal snowpack this winter. Current state of the snowpack, we're on this black line here. People in my discipline we're watching this very closely throughout the winter, just hoping for a late season storm event. We didn't get one. The state of Colorado has already seen its max runoff for this year. So we're really in an exceptionally dry situation, and everybody in my discipline is waiting to see what monsoon season will bring, because as Ann mentioned, we are in a compact debit. We have storage limitations, and we're trying to prepare to meet as many water needs as we can. So there's not a part of the state where things are much better. So we're all suffering. Most of the Rio Grande water comes from snowpack. We are doing active water resources management currently underway, I believe. In the trauma, it's already under AWRM. If it's not, it's coming up very soon. We are also planning for fire and flooding responses. We know that when we have these very dry years, especially this year, it's back-to-back 2 dry years with minimal snowpack, that we could experience fire, and we're currently preparing response conditions to that. There are environmental compliance challenges, environmental flows, endangered species, and in the Rio Grande, obviously this is an issue for irrigators. On the Colorado, we supplement flows to some users in the Rio Grande with San Juan Trauma Project water. Colorado, as I mentioned, has already seen their max flow due to runoff. So extensive drying and extremely low water levels. So agency priorities, shifting from, we know we have challenging conditions right now, and we know that this is not, even with a good monsoon season, that we're not going to be out of the woods. Mega drought or aridification or whatever term we'd like to use, we know these issues with water supplies will persist, and increasing demand from different, as has been mentioned today, different types of uses. One of the big modernization approaches is something Layla mentioned, which is partnership with the Water Data Initiative to make sure we have better information to make decisions. So whether that's aquifer mapping program or a big initiative that's coming up in the Rio Grande, the Middle Rio Grande, is metering. So many people are surprised to see the metering that exists throughout the state of New Mexico, and it's not, I don't remember exactly what the percentage is, but it's small. We don't actually meter a lot of our water use. So, and you can't manage what you don't measure. That's going to be deployed, I believe, sometime this year. So we really have a better sense of how much water is used at any given time, so we can actively manage it. We are focusing on the Rio Grande, so as has been mentioned, the Lower Rio Grande settlement is, those discussions are ongoing to manage the compact debt and account for water uses on the Lower Rio Grande. As has been mentioned, there's a significant amount of funding that went into river channel maintenance, so making sure that state and our other water using partners can make sure the water gets where it needs to go, whether that's through habitat improvements or the channel itself, just to make sure that we can stay in compliance with compact. And then a lot of planning for our water future. The state regional planning rules were approved this year, and that effectively establishes planning regions throughout the state, puts resources towards planning so that there can be more local involvement in water planning and prioritization of how water is managed in those different regions. I'll talk a little bit more about the penalty bill, House Bill 111. So the fines or fees for compliance, so either illegal water use, overwater use, were 100 years old and centuries old dollars. And so unfortunately over that time, some of those fines, they're shrinking in comparison to inflation, and it just kind of rolled into the cost of doing business. So there was really, the overuse or illegal use of water wasn't really disincentivized over time. And so with House Bill 111, the enforcement fines, they're up to $3,500 a day, is much more significant. Our agency is still more focused on repaying water with water because that's what we all need to live. I mean, money doesn't, you have a suitcase full of money, but if you don't have water, you're not going to be able to enjoy that. So that's still our priority, is to work with users if there is a violation to address that. We also have money for enforcement staffing. Our agency is relatively small over the state of New Mexico, and so having staff that can be in the field that can make sure that, when there's illegal water use happening, that they catch it early, and so it doesn't impact the hydrologic system. We received money for Lower Rio Grande settlement implementation, and I mentioned channel maintenance. We continue to receive funding for Indian water rights settlements, and a big effort is going towards that work in the Middle Rio Grande, with a lot of users there. The strategic water reserve, and again, the regional planning and 50-year water action plan. And so the priority of our agency is really to think ahead. We're in rough times now. There's probably not a future where none of us have to think about water again. And so we need to develop the tools and the practices and the people in order to implement those changes. I'm not gonna, I talked already about this, but the modernization of the agency is a big effort. Water's sort of been maybe a little bit on the back burner as a priority, and some of our technical resources really reflect that. We have sort of systems that aren't really built to respond to what we're used to these days. We're used to being able to pull up our phone and look at, what's in our bank account, and the same capacity doesn't really exist for water. And so building out that infrastructure so we can better manage it. I mentioned expanded metering. Also partnering with sister agencies and making sure that, you know, the aquifer mapping happens and is incorporated. Layla had mentioned, you know, somebody asked who uses it. Like, we are one of the biggest users, the Office of the State Engineer. The Hydrology Bureau works hand in hand really with Bureau of Geology these days to make sure that the data outputs that they're collecting are most readily input into our hydrologic models. So somebody mentioned earlier, you know, the protest process, but evaluation of hydrologic impacts happens outside of that process too. Any application to move water from one place to another gets analyzed, tools that we have, and really we've made a strong effort to bring things up to date and make them useful. On the lower Rio Grande, some things I haven't mentioned are system efficiency. So we need the Office of the State Engineer and the Interstate Stream Commission work really in close partnership with irrigation districts and conservancy districts to make sure water gets from one place to another. There's been a lot of work on brackish water development, so with the Bureau of Geology, these magnetic surveys to survey where brackish water may exist and where there might be brackish water resources that aren't in direct connection with fresh water. Habitat restoration in the Middle Rio Grande, and maintenance of the Rio Trauma and the Elephant Butte Delta Channel. So those last 2 points are really talked about extreme weather events, extreme sediment, push into the river that impacts the efficiency of moving water through the river. And the 50-year water action plan, a big focus is water education. My colleague Julie Valdez here in Water Use and Conservation Bureau. If you haven't talked to her, if you haven't seen some of the things that our agency produces for educational purposes, please check in with us. You know, to get out in schools and events like this and really talk about the things that the agency is doing. And also just hear from, you know, education goes both ways, hear from you about your concerns. The Water Security and Planning Act, that was part of the rulemaking for our planning regions. InStream New Mexico is the website that has a lot of resources for what the Interstate Stream Commission is investing in. And they've, you know, that's prioritized recommendations for funding. And then last in there, the prioritization of Indian water rights settlements year over year, is working to work through those water rights settlements. And so, like I mentioned, just to circle back again, is we know that this is a pervasive issue. The percentage is 25% less water in New Mexico streams over the next 50 years. This, if there was a year to illustrate that 25% is part of a distribution of percentages, and it's not, on average, we are much worse than that this year. And so kind of keeping top of mind is like, we need the flexibility to be able to store water differently, to move water more efficiently, potentially to use other sources of water, such as brackish water, and you know, we're right in the center of it here in New Mexico, and that is all I have. So thank you so much for your time today, and open for questions. Yes.
I have one. So we said you're looking at the endangered species. In this area here, what type of endangered species do we have? Because over the last 10 years alone, I've seen albino elk disappear. I've seen bobcats, turkeys, a lot of things migrate away from this area because of, I'm assuming because of the water. And what endangered species are you referring to?
I'm not exactly sure. So the ones that I'm aware of are the silvery minnow, the willow flycatcher,
yellow-billed cuckoo, the New Mexico meadow jumping mouse, Pecos sunflower.
Yeah, there are Pecos sunflower down here in Socorro County. Look further south.
So yeah, those five.
You said a jumping mouse?
The New Mexico meadow jumping mouse, yeah, and that's pretty much only exists on the Bosque de la Apache, right?
Mm-hmm.
I got a question. I was just reading I did a Google search. There's about 55% of water loss due to evaporation along the Rio Grande. About 100,000 acre feet of water that's lost every year. Has there anything been done to try to study that? How there's been some projects in California and Arizona where they put these floating solar panels over the canals to reduce the amount of evaporation, and plus it generates electricity as well. Has there anything been done like that in New Mexico? On the Rio Grande?
I'll let Katie answer, but we do have a project, so go ahead. Yeah, I'm not familiar. I'm familiar with what you've mentioned. The challenges of managing those kind of structures over channels are really different, or canals are really different than over a river. So I think in certain conditions they might be appropriate. It sounds like Ann has an example.
There's a company called Emergy. We're doing a pilot project with them on our Socorro main canal, very close to the Santa Clara diversion dam. And so there's a couple of turbines that are producing power, and there's also a little solar right on top of it. And we've tied it into our dam structure, so we can sell power back to the Socorro County utility, or we can also run our automatic gates at our dam there. So it's not big enough to really maybe make a sizable dent in evaporation, but it is something that we're exploring.
Well, I mean, since evaporation is one of the biggest losses of the water, scarce water around now. I mean, it seems like there would be something done to try to kind of build on that.
Oh, yeah.
So that we can keep more of the water.
There are definitely trade-offs we get pipe everything, right? But there's ecological trade-offs to that, and even cultural ones. So I think maybe a balanced approach to trying to
I think to kind of tie in where Ann had mentioned, and with the state engineer, the evapotranspiration from the plants in the bosque, right? I mean, it's not evaporation, but evapotranspiration, right? And so there was, $5 million for bosque management, and so that can help too as well with the evapotranspiration that we lose from these invasive species, right, in the bosque. And just managing it better. Right now at this point, the bosque is a highly managed system, just like the river is itself. And so it's good that we're having this conversation to have, we are, all these different entities are working very closely together. And it's important to have these ideas, I think, from everyone here in the audience too, so.
I do know that several entities are looking at aquifer storage and recovery, so that's where you store some of your extra water underground. It requires having good data about your subsurface. You don't want to put good quality water into something salty. You don't want to put it somewhere where it's just going to maybe go right back into the river. So it's something that is an option, but it requires the science to do it correct.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I would add to that by saying, along the lines of water data, the state engineer's office is working with the Desert Research Institute to quantify evaporative losses from open water and irrigation to understand what, in a more real-time basis, how that's changing and explore options of how to store water differently at different times at different elevations, so you can maybe address some of those trade-offs. For example, storing water in a high elevation reservoir with the same surface area at a lower elevation is going to save some of the water from evaporative loss. And so, but we need the information to be able to do that, and at least with what we're working with, it's pretty dated. So within the next year or two, we're hoping to have that more at hand.
I think it's going to be real important since it's going to get drier and drier and less water. So I think that's something that needs to be considered.
Yes.
My question is probably more for you and from tech office that does data for water. I actually always wondered if somebody, some kind of power or authority can do something with New Mexico Tech water usage because New Mexico Tech is very outdated sprinklers that break all the time and basically flood the area, happening all the time. And even when they work as they're supposed to do, essentially they are like fountains that water concrete and everything. So it's, I don't know how much waste it is, but just looking at it, it looks like it's a lot of waste in this, time when we try to really, manage water well. And whenever I raise this, question with tech admins or whoever, they always say, to fix it, the whole system needs to be replaced. But I actually don't see why not to replace it. In the long run, it will be, I think, good, good for everyone to conserve water. So, asking about this, everyone who knows.
I just have a quick anecdote that, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Lego League. It's a competition kids do, and they have to do a science research. And so the kids in Socorro, their research project was creating an app so that people in Socorro and tech students could quickly alert tech to a leaking sprinkler or something that was wasting water. So even the kids in town are aware of it, the middle school kids. So I don't have a real solution, but I know that it's obviously other people are aware of it.
But I wonder if, I don't know, any state, maybe agency or somebody can induce them to replace this sprinkler system to fund replacement or something.
I would say that, a county ordinance would be your quickest ways that Socorro County Commission, or like the city, if there was a city ordinance, I'm not sure geographically who would cover what, but, like the city of Albuquerque has an ordinance that you can't water. And so that's why they have very strict rules in how they enforce it. And so at that local level, the Socorro County that would be your quickest bet, if there is the political will. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
I'm concerned about wells and pumping.
That's what I was gonna.
Farmers want to keep their crops alive, so we can apply for wells. But in most cases, what we're drawing up is the drinking water, not the garbage that comes from Albuquerque down to us. We're kind of the kidneys of the area. We purify water by putting it out on our fields. And I've seen over the years that people will be transferring water into wells, and it can get to be called stacking. Who knows how many acre feet are down in this well that's this big, but I was wondering if the state engineer has a limit to that, and then kind of associated with the problem, if everybody's pumping, the river goes dry, so any water that goes into the river goes down through the thing, and we're not looking at the whole picture, it seems like.
Right, and I'm not sure if supplemental wells are not allowed within MRGCD. I think they have been not allowed since the 50s. So kind of acknowledging what you just said, which is surface and groundwater are connected. If you're not getting surface water deliveries, you're essentially finding another way to get that same water. But so I think there are some supplemental wells that were permitted prior to the 50s that are allowed, but to my knowledge,
That's right, yeah, so I get this question a lot, right, and so, unless you transferred your surface diversion to a groundwater, you would have to have a declaration first of a pre-1907 water right, or, before 1925, essentially before MRGCD, if you're not on MRGCD's permit itself. Many individuals actually don't have a pre-1907 water right, they're just irrigating off of MRGCD's permit. And so you'd have to first declare a water right,
and then have it permitted by the state engineer to then transfer it on your same property into a groundwater well. But you can only have a supplemental well, right, if it was permitted prior to 1950, but you don't get to stack on top. Say you only get the 2.1 consumptive use of acre feet, you don't get any more. Say if you use your supplemental well, you only still get that same amount. And how is that enforced? I mean, that's the issue, right? That's the difficult thing to enforce, because individuals can have like a livestock watering well, you can have your domestic well, which is, dependent on what it is. It could be permitted at 3 acre feet, it could be 1 acre foot, but it's for non-commercial, not for irrigation purposes. So you can have a irrigation well that you have transferred a water right into specifically for that, right? We have the ponds, up the street from here, really, and so they have additional irrigation water that they have transferred into groundwater, but they have to additionally stack a water right above and beyond that, and they are permitted, and then you have to submit your meter readings to the state engineer's office, which is digital now, which is a lot easier to do. And now we have a metering order, which you talked about briefly for, wells. So I think it's coming where we're going to see a lot more metering here in the Middle Valley, very specifically from the state engineer's office.
Another little wrinkle in this well thing is, like, the city of Las Lunas buys water rights, puts it in their well. You're supposed to use it for beneficial use. They can't use it all because they are not grown out quite. So then they lease it back to other farmers or whatever. I mean, it's kind of like a shell game.
So what he's referring to is that a city or a municipality can have a 40-year water plan, and so they can purchase these water rights and hold them. You might have seen use it or lose it. It doesn't apply to cities in the same way as long as they have a 40-year water plan. And so, it's like an accounting situation, because we're really moving around paper water rather than wet water at that point.
Once again, money, water always flows uphill to money.
I have a comment, I guess, and a bunch of questions in that comment. We are here in the MRGCD are tasked with keeping Elephant Butte / Caballo at a certain level, 400,000 acre feet, or whatever that is, right? And for the most part, I'm not fortunate where I'm at in the south of Albuquerque to be able to have a well, okay? But I noticed recently, this past year, that there has been a difference between the allocation of supplemental well use below Elephant Butte as opposed to the use that the wells are up here. Has that been reconciled? 3 acre feet versus 4.5 acre feet for agricultural use? Are they looking into that, or is it set in stone where it's 3 acre feet here and 4.5 acre feet down there?
We're not adjudicated here in the Middle Valley, and so as individual, if an adjudication, whenever it does start, right, is the state engineer would do a hydrographic survey first. And so that hydrographic survey would be a survey of the water rights and to make a determination. It has historically been the 3 acre feet, but really that includes your farm delivery requirement as well. So, we know that you have a diversion here in this county still, even though we're in Socorro County, right, your diversion is at the Isleta Diversion Dam. And so from there, from Isleta Diversion Dam is quite a while, a ways away, so you have to get that water. So you might have a higher FDR, but you still only have a consumptive use potentially of 2.1. I'm not sure, we don't know what it necessarily is, but that's what Ann is really managing with those amounts of how much to divert for the
the area,
My-
but.
My comment would be that, and I know the compact doesn't care about fair or equity, it is what it is, we have to all abide by it. But my comment is that I know firsthand that I've got farmer friends down there in Cruces that are able to turn a switch on, pump that water into an existing lateral and sell it to their neighbors. While I am tasked with keeping Alpha Butte at a certain level. That ain't cool. I don't know what to say about it, but you know, if they're allowed to deplete the aquifer, we know that Alpha Butte, that any lake is directly related, and the aquifer is directly related to the amount of water that's in Alpha Butte. So I'm happy to get water down there to Alpha Butte, so these guys can, my friends, can flip on a switch and irrigate. Not only that, having said that, is that now that water is being transferred to Oracle, the Santa Teresa Data Center, through the sod farm, through what the state allowed as, if I'm correct, allowed as an emergency well use permit from the sod farm to be able to do that, and then they turned around and took that water and sold it to Oracle. How do we control our water, not only surface but groundwater? What ideas can we come up with that allow us to have better control over this use? How do we get the state involved with that? Along with using some of this oil and gas, $3 billion to help us, different topic, but to help us implement the aquifer, not the aquifer, the infrastructure that is needed to support this hydrology for this state. We have to get the state involved. Feds aren't going to do it, especially not under this administration. We all know that. And going to the future, it's like pulling hair, and we can do the low diversion control deal down here, but we can only do 10 miles of it at a time. Well, by the time we get it down to Butte, it's going to be time to do it over here again. I don't understand how come we can't help through these agencies and so forth that the state say, here, let's have our legislature, I wish Gail was still here, but let's have our legislature implement some bills that allows MRGCE and the Office of State Engineers to do their job. I would love to be able to dig a well to help me supplement my irrigation when I don't have it, to keep hay alive, to grow hay in the fall like you're supposed to, so you can get it through the winter to grow it next year. This idea that we have that, well, alfalfa uses more water than anything that we grow out there. That may be true somewhat, but I'll tell you what, I would bet against that water usage as to my carbon footprint putting in annuals every year, because it's huge. It's huge. When I have half of my acreage going into oats and then hopefully can get water to grow things like tip and stuff like that so I can get through a break-even year with water, it's important for us to be able to do that. If somebody told me that, okay, you can have a well, you can put in a well here for 3 acre-feet for until we're where you don't need that anymore, and then the state can rescind that right, I would be the first in line to do that.
I appreciate your comments, and there's kind of a question there, right? I mean, just to give an overview of why does it look a little different here in the Middle Valley, like versus down in like Las Cruces, for example. We do have different, areas. So we're in the Middle Rio Grande, but really we're in the Rio Grande Bolson, right? And so that's like the state engineer's office views that differently than in the Lower Rio Grande, so say, for example, right, there are different like district-specific regulations that we see in the Lower Rio Grande. So there are sometimes different rules based on locations as well, and the ability, there still are, of course, laws of transferring water rights between areas, but with Texas v. New Mexico and Colorado, the original action 151, I mean, that is one of the reasons is from the accounting purposes, and then also, one of the arguments was that
Las Cruces, farmers were essentially just pumping, from the river itself because they're so hydrologically connected. I'm using a lot of hydrology words that, Katie probably can use better, but, that was one of the issues, right, is why this came out. And we are now seeing, that this, there are programs now where they are buying and drying, not fallowing, but buying and drying farms, just south of us, where we haven't seen that yet because, a little differently, the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District statutorily can manage the water versus where now in the Lower Rio Grande, it is very much the state engineer is, I'll say it coming down very hard, whereas MRGCD can still manage. Yeah.
It's not wood.
Yeah. We'll find some. So, yeah. But I think, just to make that really dichotomy of why does it look so different here versus in the Lower Rio Grande, and, we still have to follow, some of the baseline rules about it, and we are following the rules via the compact, of course, but it does look a lot differently of how Middle Valley is being managed. Yeah.
Is the state looking at not restricting, but including a water use program to curtail the pumping down below Elephant Butte?
I think the metering.
Yes.
Metering. Yeah, the most of the metering has been deployed exactly there. So like there's a magnifying glass on meter records, remote sensing data, field surveys, all of that.
Continuous water level measurements, gauges.
Yes.
It's a very monitored part of the state.
And also part of the settlement, there's now a new gauging station south of there, so that part of the state is now gonna have a delivery obligation, whereas prior it really didn't, right?
Yes.
That was one of my question is how do we implement that part of that? Because they are a huge part of the state, and to his point, money goes where it's treated best, so does water. So we need to tie them into the obligations that we have to Mexico, Texas, and Colorado for that matter. Everything makes a huge difference. I get a question quite a bit about what does the Corrales site that have to do with the irrigating in the South Valley. Well, if the river has to be 2 feet before they can turn the pump on, then it's a huge difference because it's already past the diversion. It's not going to go back uphill. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. It was really great. So those of us in Socorro County are really concerned about this data center that's being proposed. They tell us that they're going to get all their water out of the air. Do you guys govern anything like that? Because extracting water from the air, and I know that sounds funny, but that's going to affect all of us in the area. And my second question related to that, is if they're going to get groundwater, you oversee that, right?
Yes.
So like if there's a rancher that they've sold land to this data center or New Mexico Tech on their EMRTC land, they have wells. Who's going to oversee how much water is extracted out of those wells? I thought that wells go on a ranch for agricultural use, watering livestock. Can they be transferred to be used for a data center?
No.
If the MRTC has wells there, for whatever reason they might have wells there, my head is just running for anything that we can use to stop this thing.
Right, so non-domestic, 7212 wells, domestic livestock, those types of uses are allowable. Domestic wells basically allowable anywhere in the state, except for where there's local restrictions.
But it's domestic use.
Right, for only that use. Now, other water rights for other types of use, like irrigation use is a common one. So you can transfer the consumptive irrigation use into another type of use. Irrigation is the only one that has a diversion in consumption, right? And so it's really the consumptive use that you have to transfer for other types, including commercial or mining or industrial or whatever the purpose is. And so that would be transferred, and the state engineer's office evaluates those applications. Regardless of whether they're protested, the hydrologic movement of water is something our agency evaluates.
And how Katie had mentioned, like, even if there isn't a protest, but at that point, anytime a water right is transferred, even purpose of use or place of use, so say if you're not moving the place of use, it's still in the same site as location, but you're changing the purpose of use, you still have to do a change of purpose of use form with the state engineer's office, and that opens up where it has to be published, in the, say, newspaper for, 60 days, and you have any individual who feels like they will have an effect on that has the opportunity to protest at that time, which then can, essentially is your voice to come to the table and give the reasons to the state engineer why you believe that it would be detrimental to public welfare, contrary to the conservation of water, so you can have these very specific reasons, and what's really nice is that these are public documents, so you could look at other documents that have similar protesting information to see what you might need to do to, or you can talk to me as the ombudsman, and I can help you find this information in whatever way you would like to do it. I'm a neutral outside
water, you don't have anything to do with it.
Say that again?
Atmospheric water.
Could they regulate pulling moisture out of the acre? I don't know the answer to that. My guess is.
Well, I know it's funny because we live in the desert, but that is what this guy is selling this on.
Right. I mean, dehumidification is something that's been popular in the sciences for the purposes of like emergency response, right? So you're pulling water out of the atmosphere if you've got flooding and fires and your water sources are not usable. So that's been discussed in academia for a long time. It sounds like if it's not feasible, right, the amount of water that they need, it's not feasible to pull that from the atmosphere, then you've got to get it somewhere else. And so,
that's our point.
Right, right. And the state engineer does regulate that. We do regulate illegal wells. We regulate well drillers in the state. So, anytime you see a drilling rig out where maybe you don't think it should be, you can call our office. You can speak. The statewide bureau chief is very knowledgeable about all of the drillers who are operating here. Yeah.
Thanks. And I think too, like how we were mentioning, like the county ordinances is, so for example, Valencia County, like the city has an ordinance about for like any commercial uses. And so that's one of the issues where in Niagara Bottling was over pumping, right, underneath within the ordinance that they have already. And so please look at that other alternative option.
We are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The only thing I was going to add, I get this question a lot around the state of somebody's drilling a well next door, I'm worried that it's going to impact my well, what should I do? And I know the data center is kind of proposing to be up on Hammerstein and probably not affecting Socorro domestic wells, but I give people the same response statewide that it's exactly what we've been saying over and over again, you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you're measuring the water level in your well, before these new changes happen, you have data to show that perhaps they've impacted you. But if you're not measuring and you don't know, it's very hard for somebody to even review your well and now say, I don't know if this new drawdown in your well is from your neighbor or from something else. And so we do offer a free well monitoring program. It's free to well owners across the state. If you're interested, I have some flyers up here. We are even conducting a really detailed study from Santa Acacia to Bosque del Apache. We're trying to get even just one-time measurements to help us understand the water table here in our region. So if anybody's ever interested, please just reach out to the Bureau. We can help you monitor your resources, even just to manage it yourself better, to know that your pump isn't going to go dry. It's valuable.
We're on the
I figured. I was preaching to the choir here, but
no, it's okay.
The comment we ran across with what you just said was, we have a friend in Las Cruces who grows pecans, which I don't agree with, but her well went dry just after her neighbor put in a much deeper well. Apparently the state engineer response was drill a deeper well. Again, if you've got the money,
Well, but I would also counter that there are lots of places in the state where water level is dropping quickly in wells all over.
right.
And it's not necessarily the state's responsibility to watch that and to alert you and say, you need a deeper well, even without anybody's impact. And so that's why it's hard to tease out without having that information. Where is it coming from? Is it just naturally already happening? Is it something new that all of a sudden your drawdown has changed drastically?
The other thing Stephanie was talking about is you can protest all this stuff, but we were involved many, many years ago in a protest, and basically we had to go to Santa Fe to protest. There was a whole herd of people that had to go to Santa Fe to do that. Well, who does that benefit? Because most of the people who are in this area work for a living, or that sort of thing. They can't hire somebody to go in their place and know all of the little angles that they're supposed to bring up to the state engineer. On that particular protest, we slowed it down 2 years, but it cost a lot of money, and a lot of small people donated small amounts, and it made it possible. But again, it wasn't a system that worked well, and at that time, we tried to get them to locate the hearing in Las Lunas, and the state engineer said, Las Lunas doesn't have the technology for us to have a meeting there. And I thought, oh.
I think a lot of things have changed. I don't know when that protest was, but there's a lot more virtual options, I will say, and it seems like more friendly to, in rural areas especially, but it is still a difficult and long and can potentially be expensive process. I know we are at 2:16 and that the agenda said till 2 o'clock, 2:30, was like the closing remarks. I know folks may want to, go if there's no other burning questions or comments. I will be around. I know, and we'll probably all be around. If you stay around too long, now you will be mopping. So just be aware of that. This is a community event. It's going to be us cleaning. So I appreciate everyone coming. Thank you so much to Ph.D. for giving us
Yes, that's just our monitoring program. It gets everyone in our monitoring.
Yes.
And here's a flyer about it.
Thank you.